Did I get ya? Yeah? No? Hello! Welcome to the Polyglot Files. My name is Michael, and today we're doing a special video in honor of my favorite holiday, Halloween. Now, I'm apologizing in advance for the terrible lighting. I normally use natural sunlight, but it's kind of rainy and miserable here, so I figure this dim lighting will just add to the ambiance of the creepy season. So today, in honor of the Halloween season, we're talking about a dead language, Gothic. Now, a language is considered dead when there are no living speakers of that language anymore. Now, that definition of dead language is a little bit imprecise, because you can say that a language is dead, but you can still have people studying that language. That's why it's kind of confusing when people say that Latin is a dead language, because nobody speaks it natively, but it technically still is an official language of the Vatican. But for all intents and purposes, today we're going to say that a dead language is one that nobody speaks natively anymore. Gothic was an East Germanic language spoken by none other than the Goths. And no, I'm not talking about those countercultural teenagers you see around high schools who wear white makeup and dark eyeshadow and hail Satan. At one time, there were two Goth groups in Europe, the Visigoths and the Ostrogoths. These two groups could be seen as far east as Poland and as far west as Portugal. In fact, Gothic raids were one of the primary reasons for the fall of the Roman Empire. However, despite all this land seizure and raids that the Goths were doing, the Gothic language seems to only have survived about half a millennium, or about 500 years. In fact, the Gothic language seems to have disappeared completely by the 9th century CE, and it has no modern linguistic descendants today. But how much do we know about one of Earth's only East Germanic languages? Further, how close was Gothic to other Germanic languages, such as English or German or Swedish, languages that we see today? When scientists first discovered the Gothic language, one of their first hurdles was to try and decipher the Gothic script. Luckily, they quickly discovered that the Gothic alphabet was actually a mixture of the Greek and the Latin alphabet. It is said that the Gothic bishop Wulfila actually mixed the Latin alphabet with the Greek alphabet in order to create Gothic script because he was afraid the original writing system of Gothic was too pagan in front of the Christian church and would thus lead to prosecution of himself as well as the other Gothic people. Because of this, we now know what Gothic may have sounded like, simply because we can look back at the way Greek letters and the way Latin letters were pronounced at the time and kind of make estimates for how Gothic letters were pronounced. Once scientists deciphered the Gothic words, they actually figured out that the Gothic language was pretty similar to other Germanic languages. Firstly, they discovered that Gothic had 4 cases, one for nominative, one for accusative, one for dative, and one for genitive. Does that sound familiar? It should, if you've studied German. Further, Gothic had 3 grammatical genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter, as well as 2 grammatical numbers, singular and plural. Sound familiar? It should, if you've studied German. So digging deeper, how close was Gothic to German? Could speakers of one language understand speakers of the other? Since no one was alive during the time that Gothic was spoken, unfortunately, we'll never really know for sure. Besides translations for the Bible and other texts, there are no other written accounts of Gothic. Scientists do, however, have a directory of Gothic words that they've collected from these scarce amounts of Gothic texts, and they actually do yield some interesting results. It is likely that Gothic and the other Germanic languages were not mutually intelligible, but because they came from a common ancestor, they shared a large amount of cognates. Now, before I show you those cognates, I am going to say nobody knows what Gothic really sounded like, so bear with me on that one. And secondly, I have not studied Swedish before, so I'm going to try and say these Swedish words, but I know they're not going to be perfect, so save yourself the comments. I'm going to say the Swedish words wrong. Firstly, let's start with the English word hand. In Gothic, we have written accounts that that word was handis. If we look at German, the German word for hand is Hand, and in Swedish we get something like hand. As you can see, those 4 words are all pretty similar. Next, we have the word for good in Gothic, which is goth. Now, I haven't studied Icelandic intensely, but the Gothic word for good actually sounds a lot like the Icelandic word for good. In German, we have the word gut, and in Swedish, we have the word god. All of these, the English word, the German word, and the Swedish word, do sound pretty close to the Gothic word. It also is interesting to point out that most Germanic languages other than English and Icelandic don't have the TH sound, but at the time it seems that Gothic had it as well. Next, we have the Gothic word for stone, stens. And that Gothic word stens is actually pretty close to the German word Stein, as well as the Swedish word stein. Now again, we have no audio recordings of what Gothic speakers may have sounded like, so this writing system could be completely different to the way that they spoke, but it is still pretty interesting to see the links between Gothic and the other languages in the Germanic language family. Now why don't you go learn some Gothic and show those to those high school goths, huh? Nah? Thanks for watching the Polyglot Files. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And happy Halloween!